The first thing that struck me was the overpowering scent of her perfume, sweet, luxurious, and far too intense for a simple evening out. Moments later, the sharp sound of her heels cut through the quiet of the living room as she confidently made her way to the front door. She paused at the hallway mirror, tilting her head as though she were examining an exquisite painting. Then she glanced back at me, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "I'm going on a date," she announced. "Try not to get too jealous." For a few seconds, I forgot how to breathe. My eyes locked onto hers, searching for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke. But there was no laughter, no trace of hesitation, only cool, unwavering certainty. She truly believed this was normal, something I should simply accept. A heavy, icy weight took hold in my chest, anchoring me in place. I had shared 7 years of marriage with this woman, given her my love, made sacrifices, built a future together. And now, with just a few words, it all felt meaningless. She reached for the doorknob, clearly not expecting any response from me. That's when I finally found my voice. "Wait." She froze, but didn't bother to face me. The air between us felt dense, difficult to breathe. My thoughts swirled chaotically as I tried to wrap my head around what she had just said. "You're joking," I managed, though my voice lacked the strength I'd intended. Slowly, she turned her head just enough to look at me over her shoulder. Why would I be joking? And just like that, the truth slammed into me like a wave crashing onto rocks. She wasn't pretending. Every word she said had been real. The woman I had trusted with my heart, the one who had once held my hand through life's most difficult moments, had just informed me, with no emotion, that she was going out with someone else. As though I were irrelevant. But I wasn't, and I refused to let her leave thinking otherwise. My heart didn't pound from anger or desperation, but from a sudden and piercing clarity. I now saw things as they truly were. "Go ahead," I said evenly. "But when you come back, don't use your key." For the first time, I caught it, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. That smirk she wore so confidently faltered, if only briefly. In that small shift, I realized something important. This wasn't over. Not even close. The silence between us grew heavier, stretching long and thick. She had expected me to explode or beg. Instead, I gave her calm, measured words. "Go ahead. But when you come back, don't use your key." She blinked, the smirk losing its power. "Excuse me," she scoffed, shifting her weight to one side like she had just heard something absurd. I leaned back against the armrest of the couch, keeping my face neutral. But inside, my world was unraveling, and something colder than anger began to settle in. It wasn't sorrow or fury, it was finality. She tilted her head, trying to read me, the confidence she had moments ago beginning to erode. "You can't be serious." I exhaled slowly, then rose to my feet. "You expect me to sit here while my wife goes on a date with another man, and just accept it?" My voice stayed quiet, but the edge in every word was unmistakable. "Whatever image you have of me, erase it. That's not who I am." She folded her arms, but I noticed the uncertainty flickering behind her eyes. She had been convinced I'd break down, plead, or shout. But I wasn't giving her the reaction she'd prepared for. "Not tonight." "Look, I didn't mean it like that," she said with a dismissive eye roll. "You're seriously overreacting." "Overreacting?" I echoed with a hollow laugh, shaking my head in disbelief. "You just told your husband you're going on a date. And now you expect me to be, what? Encouraging." She opened her mouth, maybe to defend herself, but I wasn't done. "Let me ask you something, Meredith," I said, emphasizing her name in a tone she disliked. Firm and unfamiliar, like I was addressing a stranger. "Is this a one-time thing? Or has this been happening for a while?" Her lips parted, but no words followed. That tiny pause, the silence that lasted just long enough, answered everything. I ran a hand through my hair, murmuring under my breath. The home I had known for years now felt foreign, like I was standing in a life that no longer belonged to me, watching it collapse from the outside. She gave a dismissive sigh and shifted her stance again. "It's not a big deal." That did it. That phrase cut deeper than anything else. Not a big deal. Something inside me shifted, not in rage, but in resolve. That phrase made it all so clear. I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. She stiffened just slightly. "Let me make this simple for you," I said. "Go on your date, Meredith. Have a great time. Just understand that when you return, you won't be my wife anymore." Her eyes went wide. "You're being dramatic." I gave her a small, steady smile. A slow, calculated smile curved across my face. So, she was single now? The confidence she'd carried into this conversation had vanished completely. Whatever sense of control she thought she had over me was slipping fast. She had walked and braced for a confrontation, convinced I would be the one to crack under pressure. But that wasn't happening. I wasn't breaking, I was stepping away from the wreckage. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse, and for a fleeting second, something passed through her eyes. It wasn't fear of me, it was the dread of losing control. That's when everything clicked. She had never anticipated that I might choose myself instead of clinging to her. I took a step back and folded my arms. "You should go. Your date is waiting." She remained still. That hesitation spoke louder than anything she could have said. She didn't leave. She stood there, gripping her purse strap so hard her knuckles turned pale. Just minutes ago, she was full of poise, proudly announcing her plans for the evening. Now, she looked like the ground beneath her had started to shift. I didn't need to speak. The echo of my earlier words still hung in the air between us, pressing down with quiet finality. "Go on your date," I had said. "But when you come back, you won't be my wife anymore." I could almost see her thoughts turning over, trying to grasp at something, anything to steady herself. She'd expected me to explode, to argue, or maybe even beg. Instead, she found herself watching the walls of her own arrogance collapsing. A sharp exhale escaped her lips, followed by a forced laugh. "You're being ridiculous," she said, trying to act like she still had the upper hand. I kept quiet. Her eyes flicked toward mine, searching for any trace of doubt, any crack in the surface. But I gave her nothing. I watched her shift her stance slightly, the confidence she once wore now faltering. Then, like someone bluffing in a losing game, she lifted her chin and smirked again. "You're bluffing." The word hit me hard, sinking deep like a stone dropped into deep waters. I had extended an outstretched hand, a chance for her to realize what her words truly meant. But instead of taking it, she doubled down. And right then, I realized something else. She had never believed I would actually walk away. A quiet breath escaped my lungs as I stepped closer. She didn't flinch. "Go." One word. Firm. Clear. A directive, not an appeal. The smirk disappeared. "You're serious," she said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. I nodded. Completely. Her throat moved as she swallowed hard. For the first time, her mask cracked, and behind it, I saw hesitation. She had assumed I would stay put, that I'd wait like some backup option, a safety net she could rely on after her fun was over. But that net had been cut, and she was starting to realize it. Her fingers twitched on the strap of her purse. "You're really going to throw everything away because of one date?" she asked, her voice low. I exhaled slowly, keeping my tone even. "No, Meredith. I'm not discarding anything. That happened the moment you decided this was okay." She blinked and turned her head, avoiding my gaze. Her self-assurance had nearly vanished, and the silence between us grew tense. And then, just as quickly, she changed course. She straightened her back, lifted her chin defiantly, and let out a scoff. "Fine." She spun around and marched toward the door. I didn't move to stop her. I didn't call out. I didn't plead. I just stood there and watched. Her hand reached for the doorknob, pausing briefly, barely a heartbeat, before she pulled it open. In that moment, she stepped out. The door closed behind her with a final, echoing click. I remained still, eyes fixed on the space she had just occupied. Reality came crashing down like a wave, cold and absolute. She was gone. Yet, oddly, I didn't feel shattered. What washed over me instead was something I hadn't felt in a long time: relief. The silence that followed was thick, pressing in from all sides. I stood there, half expecting her to rush back in, scrambling to justify everything she had done. But the longer I stood in that stillness, the clearer it all became. She wasn't coming back, and I wasn't going after her. A strange sense of peace settled over me, like the quiet that follows a violent storm. I had spent years carefully treading through the minefield of this marriage, doing everything I could to hold it together while she steadily distanced herself. The unexplained absences, the constant late nights, the phone she guarded like a secret, all the warning signs had been flashing for years. I just hadn't been ready to see them. But now, there was no unseeing the truth. I moved toward the living room, each step slow and intentional, as though I was walking into a space that had always been mine but never truly felt like it. The atmosphere had changed. It was no longer just a shared space, it was mine now. I dropped onto the couch, my body weighed down by everything that had just happened, yet my mind was sharp. I should have felt bitter. I should have felt crushed. But instead, what settled in was an unexpected clarity. She had chosen her path. And for the first time in years, I was finally choosing mine. I turned my gaze toward the bookshelf, where a framed wedding photo sat. The two of us, smiling. Her hand resting over my chest. Just a snapshot of a happiness that had only ever been surface deep. I stood up, made my way across the room, and reached for the picture frame. As I held it, the weight in my hands felt heavier than just wood and glass. It was like I was holding on to a former version of myself. A version that once believed love could last forever, that turned a blind eye to all the signs, that had faith in her. A sharp laugh slipped out of me. What a fool I'd been. I flipped the frame around, tore off the back, and slid the photo free. Tearing it felt too satisfying. I ripped it in half. Then again, and again, until it was nothing but a heap of jagged scraps. The tiny shredded pieces fell to the floor, the perfect symbol of what my marriage had crumbled into. Almost instinctively, I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over her contact name for a long second before I finally did what I should have done ages ago. I blocked her. Her name vanished from the screen, as if it had been swallowed up by the emptiness she'd left behind. I let out a long breath. Then I removed her from everything: social media, shared accounts, anything that connected her to my world. Erased. It wasn't painful. There was no sadness in it. Just a sudden, clear sense of liberation. I had no idea where she had gone that night. Honestly, I didn't care. What I did know with absolute clarity was that she hadn't just stepped out for an evening with someone else, she had walked right out of my life. And I had no intention of letting her walk back in. The night wore on, quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. But this stillness wasn't uncomfortable. For the first time in years, being alone in my house didn't feel like being suffocated. It felt like relief. The constant tension that used to hang in the air like thick smoke had disappeared, as though someone had finally cracked a window and let it drift out. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't pour myself a drink. I just sat there, letting the silence wrap around me, absorbing everything that had happened. I should have been falling apart. I should have been pacing, racking my brain, wondering where I went wrong. But I wasn't. I had nothing left to question. I was finished. I glanced over at the clock. It read 10:43 p.m. somewhere out there. She was probably with him, laughing, smiling, touching him the way she used to touch me. The man I used to be would have been torn apart thinking about that. He would have lost sleep, tormented by the images in his head. But the man sitting in this room tonight? He didn't care anymore. Because she was no longer his concern. The sudden buzz of my phone pulled me out of the stillness. I picked it up, frowning. An unknown number. I was about to let it ring out, but something told me to answer. "Hello," I said. There was a short pause, and then a voice I didn't recognize spoke. "Hey, is this Owen?" My hand tightened around the phone. "Who's this?" The voice on the other end sounded uneasy, maybe even awkward. "Look, man. I wasn't sure if I should call, but I figured you deserved to know. I'm with Meredith right now." A strange calm came over me, detached and cold. "Okay," I replied. He hesitated, clearly thrown by how unaffected I sounded. Yeah. So, here's the thing. She's drunk. Crying a lot." I blinked. "Crying?" "Yeah," he continued. "She's saying she made a mistake. That she thought you'd flip out, beg her to stay, try to win her back. But you didn't. And now she's falling apart." I leaned back, running a hand across my jaw. "Let me guess," I said. "She asked you to call me." There was a pause, then a reluctant, "Yeah, of course she had." This wasn't about regret. This wasn't remorse. This was about control. She thought she still had me under her thumb. She thought she could disappear for a few hours, come back, and find me waiting, ready to fight for her again. But that version of me? He was gone. I inhaled deeply and said, "Tell her something for me." "Sure," he replied. "Tell her she made her choice. Now she gets to live with it." There was a quiet moment, then a soft damn from his end. I ended the call. The second it disconnected, something lifted from my chest. It was truly over. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for another blow to come. I wasn't questioning my worth, wondering if I was loved or merely tolerated. She had shown me who she really was. And at last, I believed it. I dropped the phone onto the table, stood, and stretched. Tomorrow was a new chapter. But tonight, I would savor the silence. I didn't sleep. Not because I was broken-hearted or stuck in a loop of memories pretending they were happy. I stayed awake because, for the first time in years, my mind wasn't clouded with doubt. I wasn't lying there with my chest tight. ears straining to hear the door creak open, wondering if she was really out with friends. The house was mine now. Fully, peacefully mine. By 5 in the morning, I was already brewing coffee. Not because I needed to be up early, but because I felt awake. Fully, truly awake. It was like a weight I didn't know I had been carrying had finally slipped off my shoulders. As the coffee machine gurgled, I leaned against the kitchen counter and caught my reflection in the microwave's dark screen. I looked different. Or maybe, for the first time in a long time, I was seeing myself clearly. I had spent years being the dependable husband, the one who forgave, who justified, who ignored every red flag because he believed in love, in commitment, in her. And last night, she left without a second thought. When she finally understood that I wasn't waiting around for her return, panic set in. Her entire sense of control shattered. Her reality had always hinged on the belief that no matter what she did, I'd still be there, faithful, loyal, hers. But that era had ended. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me from my thoughts. I poured myself a cup and made my way to the living room, easing down onto the couch. The house felt hollow, but not in a sad or lonely way. It was more like a space that had finally been unsealed, purged of all the years of tension, silence, and pent-up frustration. Then came a knock at the door. I didn't move at first. I simply stared at the door, my grip tightening around the warm mug. I already knew who was on the other side. Another knock followed, this one more urgent. With a resigned sigh, I set the cup down and stood. There was no point in delaying. I walked over and opened the door. Meredith stood there, disheveled and worn down. Her makeup was smeared, and her usually flawless hair looked tangled and unkempt. The scent of alcohol clung to her, mingling with something else, guilt. Her eyes were puffy and red from crying. She hadn't even stopped at home. She had come directly to me. "Owen," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, fragile in a way I'd never heard before. "Can we talk?" I leaned against the frame of the doorway, folding my arms across my chest. "Talk about what exactly?" She hesitated, clearly unsure of how to start. "About what happened last night." I remained silent, watching her carefully. She swallowed and took a shaky breath. I made a mistake." I lifted an eyebrow in response. "Is that so?" She let out a quick breath and averted her eyes. "You don't understand, Owen. I never intended for it to go this far." A bitter, joyless laugh escaped me. "What didn't you mean to do? Tell your husband you were going out with someone else? Embarrass me in front of everyone in our home? Or was it realizing that I wasn't going to beg you to stay this time?" Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. There was nothing she could say, and we both knew why. She had crossed a line that couldn't be walked back. The silence between us stretched, thick and unbearable, for her at least. For years, she had used her words like tools, weaving stories and excuses that somehow made me feel like the one at fault. She always managed to talk me into forgiving her, into staying. But not this time. Eventually, she spoke again. "I wasn't thinking clearly, Owen. I don't know. I thought you would fight for me. That was it." Something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger, but something far clearer. I laughed, this time, genuinely, deeply. Meredith's expression changed as she frowned, confused. "Why are you laughing?" I shook my head slowly, the irony now glaring. "You thought I'd fight for you?" I repeated, still amazed. "Meredith, I've been fighting for you since the day I said I do. And all this time, all you've done is push me further away. So no, you don't get to be surprised now that I've finally let go." Her face crumpled. She had nothing to counter that, because deep down, she knew every word was true. I stood upright, letting my arms drop to my sides. "Look, Meredith, you asked for space, you've got it. You wanted a new beginning? Well, congratulations. You're getting one. Just not with me." Her eyes widened with desperation. "Owen, please. Wait." "No." I interrupted, my voice steady and unwavering. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk out one night and then show up the next day hoping everything's okay again. You chose your path. Now you have to live with it." She stepped closer, reaching out for my hand. "Please, I know I messed up. I don't want to lose you." I took a slow step back. Her hand froze mid-air, then curled into a fist as it dropped. I shook my head gently. "You already did." And with that, I closed the door. This time, I made sure to lock it. I stood there, breathing deeply, but it wasn't pain that filled my chest. It was relief. Turning away, I returned to the living room and picked up my now cold coffee. It didn't matter. I took a sip anyway, letting the bitterness ground me in the moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt unburdened. The silence that followed felt different now, heavier, but not oppressive. It was a closing chapter, not an open wound. I could still sense her presence just outside, pacing slightly, probably unsure of what to do. A part of me expected her to knock again, to demand attention, to plead. But she didn't. She waited. Then finally, I heard her footsteps slowly fade down the front steps. Just like that, she was gone. I released a long, controlled breath. My hand lingered on the door handle a moment longer before I let go. I didn't really know what I was supposed to feel right then. But what I didn't feel was hesitation. No guilt. No wondering if I'd done the right thing. Just an overwhelming wave of peace. I walked back into the living room and dropped onto the couch once more. The coffee had gone stone cold, but I welcomed the sharp taste anyway. There was no pretending anymore. Nothing to mend. No endless arguments or exhausting talks about whether our relationship had any future. Because it didn't. And for the first time, that truth didn't hurt. The weight of the past 7 years was falling away from me, piece by piece. The silence in the house wasn't haunting, it was freeing. The missing scent of her perfume wasn't a loss, it was a cleansing of sorts. Losing her, oddly enough, had helped me rediscover myself. Still, something lingered in my mind. It wasn't about her. It was about me. How had I let things spiral this far? I set my mug down and rubbed my face, the weight of everything pressing in. It wasn't just about what had happened the night before or her walking out. It went deeper, far deeper. It was all those small moments that chipped away at what we once had. The subtle betrayals, the indifferent glances, the way she slowly reshaped our marriage into something I no longer recognized. I drifted back to the beginning, to when we first met. She was magnetic, full of life and charm, always drawing people in without even trying. Back then, I truly believed I was fortunate to be with her. Like I had stumbled into something I didn't deserve. And maybe that belief was at the heart of the problem. I had spent every moment of our relationship trying to prove I was worthy of her. Always striving to be the ideal husband, the dependable provider, the man who got everything right, just so she wouldn't wake up one day and realize I didn't measure up. In doing so, I surrendered all control. I let her set the rules of our marriage, allowed her to take my presence for granted, and convinced myself that love meant enduring disrespect. I took a deep breath, held it, and released it slowly. That chapter was closed. There was no rewriting history, no pretending those years hadn't been spent on someone who never truly appreciated me. But the future? That belonged to me now. I wasn't going to shape myself into the person she needed anymore. I wouldn't bend, wouldn't settle. Without a second thought, I grabbed my phone and began clearing everything out. Old messages, erased. Photos, deleted. The playlist we had shared on Spotify? I unfollowed it. I even changed my Netflix password. Let her figure it out on someone else's account. It might have seemed small or even petty, but it gave me a sense of closure. Like I was finally snipping the last fragile tie to a life I had outgrown. I stood, stretched out my limbs, and rolled my shoulders. This day was going to be different. It was the beginning of something entirely new. I didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in what felt like ages, I was eager to discover it. The next morning had a completely different feel to it. Sunlight poured through the blinds, and a gentle breeze drifted in through the open window. There was no familiar weight pressing on my chest, no anxiety twisting in my stomach. No wondering what kind of mood she'd be in. No waiting for messages that never arrived. Just calm. I sat up, stretching as a quiet breath escaped me. This was what freedom felt like. The hardest part hadn't been last night, it was now. This was the moment when everything became real. When the forward steps actually began. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen window, watching the early morning traffic move along. A quiet contentment settled inside me. Meredith might have walked out thinking she left me broken, but she was wrong. I wasn't shattered. I wasn't lost. I was finally better off. My phone buzzed. I looked down and sighed. Meredith. She hadn't reached out since the night before, but I had expected this. She never was one to let things go easily. The message was simple. We need to talk. I stared at it, letting the silence linger before typing back. There's nothing left to talk about. Without waiting, I blocked her number. And with that, it ended. There would be no drawn-out conversations, no hopeful what-ifs, no retracing where things went wrong. She had made her decision, and now, I had made mine. And I chose myself. After finishing my coffee, I grabbed my keys and stepped out the front door. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't trapped in someone else's shadow. I wasn't clinging to the role of a husband desperate for attention. I was finally free, and I had no intention of looking back.